Welcome to the Weekends Overrated. It's your host, Don Dollar. Boy, springtime is here and summer just sent that hey big head text. It was like 90 yesterday. Moment of silence for how nice the outside is. Because we had definitely had a long, ridiculous winter. Appreciate, all the individuals who watch the content, like, share, etc. Want to keep that train rolling. You know how we like to do it. Real things in real time with real people. So, on today's What Did We Learn? You gotta do the math. And that's a broad statement that you can apply in a lot of different situations. Most times you'll see people do the math when it comes to a scenario that requires them to have to put one action with another action in order to get, with the whole subplot of whatever situation they find themselves in, whether it's personal, business, in the workplace, or even if they're not in the situation altogether, if they're just on the outside looking in. But I want to kind of pivot towards more of a personal standpoint, as in each individual, doing the math and seeing what each decision costs. Like, what's the price tag on this decision? Like, what is this going to cost me? And understanding that cost doesn't necessarily mean right then and there. Your cost can be spread out over a period of time. And, for me, one example, I like to use is, I would say from 2020, but like 2019 to 2025, roughly. I wasn't, it wasn't really any traveling, no vacations. I wasn't, going over the top with buying stuff. I was locked in on business. In that time period, bought a bunch of rental properties, invested a lot of money in the stock market, did some other business ventures. Just in general, like, I really locked in, and the decisions that I made, they were cost effective, because now, fast forward, all of the decisions that I was making, back then, I'm seeing the results of them now in a positive way. But let's flip that. If you were an individual who are always on the cusp of what we like to say, getting your shit together, and you never quite get over the hump because you make expensive decisions. And when I say expensive decisions, I don't necessarily just mean how much money you're spending on something. That's not really the crust of where I'm getting at. What I mean by expensive decisions, I mean you're making decisions that are going to cost you so much, and what you're not going to be able to do future wise, or even in the immediate future. But for example, if you had a goal of home ownership, let's just say that for example, right? But you know that you needed to clean up your credit a little bit, kind of get things stable within your day-to-day, and just have better money habits on how you spend, save, etc. Because a lot of those things translate to the mortgage loan process and all that. If you really tricked around in that time period, you see, houses used to be, you can get a house for like $120, hundo, maybe a little less, maybe a little higher, maybe 150, 170. Now, like, I'm seeing 350 plus, 400 here, 500 there. So the decisions that you made to not necessarily hone in and really, get your business together, that shit costs you. That's an expensive decision because now it requires so much more, and we're living in a real, interesting time economically. It's really something that you can look back on and have a big deal of regret, because when things were like really, really favorable, you decided to maybe have fun, or you decided to maybe, do something to enjoy yourself, but you didn't handle the business first. So literally, like, your decisions early on, they were expensive, because as you can see, the difference from buying a house in 2026 versus buying a house in 2022 or 2021 or 2019 or 2018 is a stark difference between the two. But let's not let's not just keep it in the financial or real estate realm. Let's take it even further. Having kids, to each of their own. I opted to get married first, then have kids. I don't use that or think of that as like, oh, I did it the right way. Nah, I just did it the way I wanted to do it. That's how I wanted to structure it. But sometimes when you make decisions that aren't so structured, then it costs you down the line, and that cost could be time. That could cost you time with raising your kids. That can cost you moments that you want to be there as they're growing and maturing and flourishing, that you might lose out on because of the decisions that you made prior to. You might have made decisions that require you to work jobs that you don't necessarily want to work. You might make decisions that you and the you and the child's mom is not together, so now you got to split time, so you don't necessarily have that day in and day out, and you can see them day in and day out, but I mean, like, waking up, going to sleep, like having your daily routine incorporated with theirs, whether it's school, whatever. So it's always expensive, when you don't make cost-effective decisions early on. So when you don't do the math, when you don't really calculate, the decisions that you're making now, when that bill comes later, how it be when how it is sometimes when people go out in large groups and they go to dinner and everything's all fine and dandy until that bill comes. And then now I had a water with 2 lemons and some bread, and all of the calculations start to trickle in. So that's just something that represents life, and I think even a last short example is the decisions that we make. I want to say, like, late high school, post high school, a lot of those decisions, they cost. If you was an individual who didn't necessarily put in the work to be able to establish a certain quality of life for yourself early on, then when we get in our early to mid to late 30s, you don't necessarily have certain luxuries, or you don't have certain abilities to do certain things, and we all get people come from different backgrounds and have struggles, etc. But once you get past a certain stage, a certain stage in age, you have the information readily available to you. If you decide to choose ignorance, then when that bill come, you got to do the math. You simply got to do the math. And I say all that to say, because this really all resonates with the whole mantra of the weekend's overrated, right? Where we just, we want to just breeze through the week where, the real work is put in, and we just, want to be in a celebratory illusion of the weekend, which is really a day. Saturday's the only day of the weekend. Friday you're working, Sunday you're getting ready for Monday. Let's just keep it a buck. So it's really just, heightening your awareness of, your decision making in your life, because whatever your mentality is, all of the things around you are going to align based on your mentality. Like for me, as I'm closing out here, I feel like a pastor when I go over 10 minutes. So your mentality will align all things around you. When it was 2019, we didn't even buy a home yet. I think we had an apartment with an upstairs. I forget what it's called. A loft. Yeah, we had a loft. But as I was learning about real estate and rental properties and home ownership and all of that stuff, I was like obsessed with it. I was like, it's going to happen. I'm going to make it happen. What do I have to do? I'm 10 toes down. I'm like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. And I didn't have the full recipe, or I didn't have the full game plan on how I was going to do this, that, and the third, or how I was going to get the money. It just came about, This opportunity opened up, that opportunity opened up, connected with this person, connected with that person, because my mentality and my will was so strong in what I wanted to accomplish and what I wanted to do, then the alignment naturally took place, So when you just thinking about things that you can do to better your life, just think about your decision making. That's typically a good place to start. What are some of the decisions that I make, and how much do they cost? Like, if I do this now, what's this going to cost me in a month, in 6 months, in a year, in 5 years? Sometimes you got to think about things like that. Not with everything, but with a lot of important things, you got to think about it like that, because you can trade off long-term. You could trade off long-term progress for like temporary joy, and that's not an even trade. Temporary versus long-term. You always want to take the long-term. So that's all I got for you guys today. Like I said, just to rehash, we got to do the math. The decisions that we make in life. Rather it's work-wise, rather it's, investing-wise, rather it's being a parent, rather it's in relationships, rather it's in friendships. Whatever you do, just think about your decisions, and then how expensive are they? Can you make some cost-effective decisions that can, pay dividends? Or can you make some decisions that'll leave you in debt? And not just financial debt, it's a lot of other ways, you can bind yourself. So that's all we got for today. Enjoy the weekend if you earned it. Peace.